Welcome to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. I'm Zach Kaufman. After a week off, I am back with my friend Ryan D'Amico. Well, from that point, we will move into our NFL games from this past week, and we will start with the Dallas Cowboys. I don't want to get too excited about this game. I've watched a lot of Redskins games being here in D.C. I know some Cowboys fans were hyped up about this. I was not. They won 38-14. They won big. The Redskins have not been that great. They didn't really stand out this game at all. The Cowboys still seemed like they had the same weaknesses where Dak Prescott didn't really do a lot. He did throw for 2 touchdowns, but barely passed 100 yards, only passed for 102 yards there. Their defense was still very, very beatable there, especially through the air. And it's just I'm happy with the win for the Cowboys, but I'm still not at a point where I'm excited. I'm really feeling good about the season yet. Like, I need to see them beat some better teams here moving forward, and that's what's going to have to give them a chance to make the playoffs there. And one guy that stood out to me, Jamison Crowder. He's a guy both of us like coming into the season. I have him on a couple of different fantasy rosters. He just, especially early in this game, was killing them. He had a terrible drop that went into being an interception. He had a fumble. He's the last, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks, it seems like every single week he drops one, especially in or around the end zone. It's been so consistent, and he's been playing better, but it's frustrating to see that as a fantasy owner, as just a fan of football, of how inconsistent he's been, even though he has this opportunity as their clear number 1 receiver.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, I was high on him, really high going into this year in fantasy football, and he just hasn't produced. I mean, I remember 2 weeks ago he had a good game there. I think he had like 140 or 160 yards and a touchdown, and people thought, well, maybe he's coming around and going to help some people going into the playoffs. And then Thursday night he lays an absolute egg and just has an awful game and a game to forget. So
he's still, I have him in a PPR league, so he's still very solid.
That's not bad.
5 catches, 67 yards. Because I know he was double-digit points. I guess that'd be right around 12 points. But definitely could have been a lot more if he could catch the ball consistently. It is amazing how many times he's dropped the ball this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. But getting back to this game, with the Cowboys, with where their team is right now, this is how they have to win games. They have to win games by winning the turnover battle, which they did, 4-0, forced 4 turnovers for Washington. You have to win time of possession, which they did. They have to run the ball consistently, which they did. They ran the ball over 40-plus times in this game. And that's going to equal a win, and
they got that special teams touchdown.
I was just going to say, throw in a special teams touchdown or defensive touchdown somewhere in there, and you're going to be able to win the ball game. But can they do that every week? I don't think that's realistic. So obviously, right now they're just treading water until Zeke gets back and hoping some teams lose in front of them. But with Seattle, which we'll get into here soon, Seattle beating Philly on Sunday night, that really hurt the Cowboys' chances. If the Seahawks could have lost that game, that really would have kind of opened some things up for Dallas. But I think it's an uphill battle now.
I agree, and I felt that even before this win here to get them to 500, that it's a very difficult battle for them. I'm still cheering for them every week. I'm still a huge fan of them, but sure. I'm being realistic here, and I'm not feeling great about their wild card chances. They've got 7 teams ahead of them. They're tied with 2 other teams there, sitting at that 6-6 record. They put themselves in this situation, losing some of those key games early on.
Yeah, I mean, they're behind the Packers, they're behind the Lions, and they're behind the Falcons. And then you get to the two wildcard teams, Panthers and Seahawks. I just don't think it's realistic to think that they're going to be able to catch either one of those teams. Seahawks traditionally play their best football in December, which they showed us on Sunday night. And the Panthers are, they're 8-4, and, they're a solid team. I don't think they're going to just shit the bed the rest of the year. So going to be real tough for the Cowboys here going forward.
We'll move from there into two quality teams that had kind of a lesser offensive game than expected. The Vikings beat the Falcons 14-9. The Vikings are now 10-2. The Falcons did not score a touchdown in this game with those 9 points. They dropped down to 7-5. And as of right now, they're sitting just outside of the playoffs at that number 7 position out of the 6 teams that are going to make the playoffs. They actually led at 9-7 before the Vikings went ahead there with a Kyle Rudolph touchdown in the fourth quarter. And both teams, their running backs were the top players there throughout the game. The Vikings had Latavius Murray that led them in rushing. He had 76 yards there. Between him and McKinnon, they combined for 100 yards. On the other side of the ball, Freeman and Coleman, they combined for 96 yards. It just there's not a whole lot of big statistics in this game. It was just kind of solid football, major defensive battle, especially that Vikings defense that has carried them all through this season.
Yeah, they really have. And a guy in Xavier Rhodes, who not a lot of people talk about. I mean, he's starting to get some recognition now, which he deserves. I mean, what he does week in and week out against the team's number one receiver is fantastic. I mean, he held Julio Jones to only 2 catches for 24 yards and just took him out of the game and made life miserable for that passing attack and for Matt Ryan. And look, the Vikings, they've shown the last month to 2 months that, look, they can win any way. If you want to, play a drag them out, low-scoring game just like they did on Sunday, we'll win that. And if you want to play a shootout, kind of like they did the last, against Detroit on Thanksgiving, and then there was another game in there as well. I forget who that was against. The Redskins. That's what it was. The Redskins. You want to play a game like that? We'll beat you as well. Case Keenum has been playing fantastic, but what this defense is doing, that's the reason they're winning games. Keenum obviously playing fantastic, but the defense is the reason why they are able to have the success that they are. I mean, the Falcons were 1 for 10 on third downs on Sunday. I mean, you're not going to win many games converting 1 third down throughout the entire game. So I really like what I'm seeing from the Vikings, and the only question is, and the question that everyone wants to know, can Case Keenum keep this up the rest of the year? Will he be able to keep this up as they go into the playoffs? Because obviously they're going to make the playoffs. Can he keep this up in January? And, it sets up the question, man. I mean, if they get home field advantage throughout the playoffs, let's not forget where the Super Bowl is this year. It's in Minnesota. I mean, that sets up a pretty interesting storyline. No team has ever played the Super Bowl at their home stadium. It's never happened. You think maybe it would happen once. I mean, there's been, 52 of these things? You think they would happen once, but it hasn't. So it'll be interesting to see if Minnesota makes it happen here. I'm inclined to say it's not, because I don't want to put my money on Case Keenum come January in a place like Philly or in a place like New Orleans, something like that. I just don't want to worry about that.
The thing I like with them when you bring up Case Keenum is that they haven't had to rely on him throwing for 400 yards or anything like that. He had a solid game. His completion percentage in this game was absurd at 83%. But other than that, it's very solid stats, but nothing hugely outstanding that I think is not something he can replicate going forward, whether it's the regular season, whether it's the playoffs. He threw for 227 yards here, 2 touchdowns. That's solid yardage, but that's nothing that I think he can't produce when they get to the playoffs. I know they will need him to go a little bit bigger than that when they play some of these higher quality offensive teams, like if they play the Saints or another team similar to that. Even a team like the Eagles, that their offense has been working much of this season here, he might have to do a little more than that. But I still think he's kind of what they need at this point with that great defense.
One thing that I can't remember, one thing I can't remember Case Keenum doing And I'm interested to see if he can do it, because a lot of these games, the Vikings have just jumped out and have had the lead pretty much the entire game. I don't know if you've noticed that. The last month and a half to 2 months, dating back probably to their last loss, which is October 1st against Detroit. I mean, they've pretty much led wire to wire in these games. Case Keenum hasn't had to bring them back, and I'm wondering if he has that in him. I mean, if this team isn't built, I don't think, to get down 14-0 on the road or even at home. I don't think this team's built that way. They're built to get ahead, let the defense go to work, rely on the running game somewhat, and let Case Keenum kind of play action and make some easy throws the rest of the game. So I'm interested to see if he's going to be able to have that in him, as we get into the playoffs. Because I mean, dating back to their last loss, I mean, all of these games that they've played, they've got out to leads and haven't really looked back.
It could be another year like we've seen before. I think immediately of the Ravens with a Trent Dilfer or a Joe Flacco leading them to the Super Bowl. That could be something they rely on throughout the playoffs, and it works. I think it is definitely a Super Bowl quality defense there.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I definitely agree with you on that one for sure.
Well, we'll move there into quickly going through a little bit of a blowout. The Patriots are still good. The Bills are they're sitting there at 6-6 still. They're hanging around the playoffs. We've been saying this for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks now, that we still I know I don't see them making the playoffs at all here. Nathan Peterman played and successfully did not throw an interception, though. That is one of the highlights from this game. Completed only 40% passes, but a little bit better than his timeout the time before that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, didn't have the best completion percentage in the world, 6 of 15 and threw 50 yards. But yeah, look, anytime for him he doesn't throw an interception, it's got to be a good day. So Tyrod Taylor gets hurt. That's their luck. And the Bills, we've said that they're done, and they've been done. They took a big hit in this game, not only on the scoreboard, but Rob Gronkowski just lays a flying elbow into Bills rookie cornerback Tre'Davious White's head. Gives him
like a wrestling match out there.
I mean, that was ridiculous, dude. I'm like, what is he doing? Like, it's 23-3. It's late in the game. Like, the game's over. I get you're frustrated because there wasn't a holding or a pass interference call. But look, you're huge. You're going to get mugged the whole game. Like, just get over it, Gronk. And he just proceeds to pile drive this guy right in the back of his head and gets a 1-game suspension of it. And, like, who cares? I mean, really, a Gronk misses a game. The only people that care about that are the people that have him on their fantasy team this week if they're, absolutely need him to play well. The Patriots, look, they've won without him. They'll win without him because, guess who they get to play this weekend? The Dolphins, a team that's not very good and a team that they've dominated historically since Tom Brady and Bill Belichick have been there. So no big deal there. They continue to win. And what does that say about the Patriots? I mean, Tom Brady doesn't throw a touchdown pass, 1 interception, and they still win 23-3 on the road. That's the way they are
producing there.
Yeah. Rex Burkhead, like, good night. I remember when he was at Nebraska, and I was like, this is a scrappy little player. He's one of those, like, pesky guys that you, like, don't think should be very good but produces. He's exactly the kind of player that fits in New England.
Yeah, because they have him combined with Dion Lewis, which has really fascinated me because he's been more of a receiving back his whole career, but the last 3 to 5 weeks, he's been leading them in rushing, and this is another game. He had 15 carries, 92 yards, over 6 yards per carry there. Then Burkhead had 78 yards. James White had 18 on the ground. And then both Burkhead and White contributed through the passing game as well, with White having 32 yards, Burkhead having 25. They just – every year it seems exactly like this, that the Patriots just find a way with these kind of – they're not high-end names. They really haven't had a high-end Pro Bowl kind of player since I think of Corey Dillon in the early 2000s or late 90s there. Where
early 2000s, yeah.
But since then, they've been able to kind of use these various players from Lawrence Maroney to Stephen Ridley to the guys they have now.
Kevin Falk, remember him?
What was that?
Kevin Falk. Kevin Falk, remember?
Kevin Falk receiving. He was a returner too, receiving back.
Yep.
He stuck around there for a long time.
Yeah, they loved him there. Well, he was productive.
He definitely was, and they always seem to love those players and have a lot of success with them. So just like always, I'm just very impressed with this Patriots team. They look very solid, and I have a hard time seeing anyone in the AFC that's going to be able to stand up to them. The Steelers have looked good, but I think it gets to playoff times. The Steelers have their historic troubles in away games, and
But Zach, if it sets up a matchup though in 2 weeks, in Pittsburgh, New England at Pittsburgh at 4:30, winner pretty much gets home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So that game's that's obviously the biggest game of the year in the AFC to see who gets home field. And if Pittsburgh wins it, you got to kind of like their chances at Heinz Field, where they do always play well. If New England wins it, like you said, going to be hard for the Steelers to go up there and knock off the Patriots. So probably the game of the year in 2 weeks with the Patriots traveling to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that should be exciting, especially since it's in Pittsburgh. I'd be a lot more concerned if Pittsburgh was playing in New England there, but it definitely should be a good game. Should be an exciting opportunity to see those teams play, which could end up being that AFC Championship game. What looks somewhat likely right now, with a lot of the other AFC being disappointing this year or being early. There's a lot of those kind of Jacksonville, Tennessee teams that are younger and that'll be in the playoffs, but we doubt I know we've talked about it before that we both doubt they'll be moving forward there in the playoffs. So
absolutely.
From that game, we'll move into another top-end team that beat kind of a bottom-end team, with the Rams beating the Cardinals. Rams moved to 9-3. It was 32-16 game. Blaine Gabbert with the start there for the Cardinals, throwing a touchdown, throwing 2 interceptions. The Rams were clearly led by Todd Gurley, who led them in both rushing with 74 yards and receiving with 84 yards. I don't have a whole lot to get into here, but they just stay on top there within their division, sitting at that 9-3 record. They're handling business where they need to handle business in games like this. And that's good to see for a young and up-and-coming team like this.
I think if Carson Palmer was playing in this game, I think the Rams would have lost this game. I really think that. You look at where this game was; they jumped out to a quick 16-0 lead, and then they let Blaine Gabbert orchestrate a couple touchdown drives, and it's 16-13 with about 3 minutes left to go before halftime. And you're thinking, "Whoa, Rams! They take their foot off the gas a little bit here." I mean, they're letting Blaine Gabbert kind of come back, and then look in the second half, they kind of got things underway and held Arizona to only a field goal the rest of the way. But I think if Carson Palmer was in this game, that they possibly could have lost this game. But you credit them. This is a game they should win on the road against an inferior team in the Cardinals, who've battled injuries all year and just aren't the same team that they were from a few years ago. They got to the NFC Championship game. But only thing I want to say about this game, and it's someone I've talked about before, but I just love the guy, Larry Fitzgerald. Man, I love Larry Fitzgerald. I have him in one of my fantasy leagues, and he hung around, and I guess people just because they think he's old, they just didn't draft him. I didn't understand it. I got him as my third receiver, and he had 10 targets, 10 receptions, 98 yards, and a touchdown on Sunday. I mean, he just keeps performing. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. I think he's just a professional, which I love. I can't say that enough, how much I love players like him. So tip of the hat to Larry Fitzgerald. I love him, and he's a hell of a player. Rams, bigger test this week, though.
Yeah, Larry Fitzgerald is an incredible player. I know I was in that thought category. Not necessarily that I'm concerned about him being old, but at some point I feel like he's going to drop off like a lot of receivers do, except for Steve Smith. He just seemed to play forever until he got hurt, and it's very rare to see that. But Larry Fitzgerald looks like he can be one of those players. I know the last 2 to 3 years I've been avoiding him just in case he has that drop-off and playing the upside of a younger receiver. But he continues to prove me and other people with that same thought pattern wrong every year. Like you said, he's been a steal when you look at it on draft day every single year. The past many years where he's just a receiver 3, a wide receiver 2, and continues to produce and be very, very productive. We'll move from there to the Green Bay Packers picking up a win with Brett Hundley, their quarterback, to stay in this playoff hunt here. They're 6-6 right now. They won 26-20. Even though the Buccaneers did have Jameis Winston back, this is a team
How bad are the Bucs? Why are they so bad? It's unbelievable. People thought that they were a lock to make the playoffs, possibly make a run, and they're 4-8. What is wrong with Tampa Bay, Zach? Tell us.
I think they just had too many question marks with their different pieces. Doug Martin has been great some years. He's been down others. And coming into this year, there's a lot of hype about he was in the best shape of his life. He was looking like he was going to be a star running back. I know he had that suspension early on, but I still expected him to be good. That's something he has not been at all this year. This game, Martin was out. Peyton Barber filled in. He had over 100 yards rushing. They've got to find something in the running back position. And then a receiver, Deshaun Jackson was expected to have a bigger impact. He has not. He's had a couple big games. He's done what he does. He has a couple big games. He has other games he's not really there. They really need more from a second receiver. He almost should be kind of a slot receiver for a team like this, or a number 3 receiver where he's going to have those huge games, but they don't have another either number 2 or number 3 that they can really rely on for those games when he doesn't have monster games. And the defense has been very disappointing as well. A lot of those pieces we thought were coming into place, they just didn't happen at all this year. And Jameis Winston, just whether it's been injuries, but even before the injuries, he wasn't playing up to where a lot of people thought he would be, where they thought he'd take that step forward here early in his career. And he hasn't been able to do that this year.
Yeah, Nelson Aguilar actually has better numbers this year than Deshaun Jackson. I'm not sure how many people would have predicted that at the beginning of the year. I mean, that just goes to show you that our predictions and people in the media's predictions don't mean shit. But we'll still give them anyway, and we enjoy doing it. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, Winston got hurt. He didn't play up to his capability even when he was in there early this year. They had their season got off to a weird start as well, too. You remember the first game of the year got postponed because of the hurricane down in Miami. So, I mean, things got off to a weird start. They did Hard Knocks this year with HBO. Historically, I don't know if you buy into superstitions, but teams that do Hard Knocks historically it doesn't translate into good seasons. The defense, that's kind of the bigger issue. Too many games where they're giving up 30-plus points this year. I believe 4 games they've given up 30-plus points. The defense just can't get after the quarterback, and the back end doesn't defend the pass very well. In nowadays NFL, that's not a recipe for success. So they have some reevaluating to do, obviously, going into this offseason. As for the Packers, man, we were talking before we went on the air. A lot of people are getting excited about the Packers because, Rodgers is talking about coming back. We get kind of both in agreement that we don't buy it just because I think they put themselves in too big of a hole. They still are 2 games back of a wild card spot with 4 games to go. That's all but unlikely. Even if Rodgers does come back in 2 weeks when he's eligible, I don't see it happening. But, you give the Packers some credit for battling. I mean, this is a team that almost beat Pittsburgh on Sunday Night Football 2 weeks ago. So, you tip your hat to them. They're playing pretty well. They're playing better than I think some people thought without Aaron Rodgers.
And one big contributor the last 4 weeks has been Jamal Williams. He's been inefficient at times there at the running back position, but they've really needed him with Ty Montgomery now going on injured reserve. Jamal Williams in this game had 113 yards. He had a touchdown. He averaged over 5 yards per carry. And then the other rookie running back took his only carry for the game-winning touchdown from 20 yards out there, Aaron Jones, he's had his moments as well. So those 2 rookies have definitely contributed for contributed for them this year, and they're going to need them to continue that for them to have this success without Aaron Rodgers. That was the biggest difference maker for them. They didn't have a whole lot of production in the passing game, where Devontae Adams led them in receiving yards with only 42. So we'll move from that game where the Packers are sitting at 6-6 to another team who has dropped to 6-6 in their division, which is Detroit. They took a 44-20 loss against the Baltimore Ravens. Both of these teams are in the playoff hunt there, but the Lions are sitting there tied with the Packers, tied with the Cowboys at that 6-6 record. The Ravens are sitting currently in the last playoff spot in the AFC at a 7-5 record. And this game was a lot closer than the final score would indicate. The Ravens ended up winning by 24, but in the fourth quarter, it was actually 27-20 until Matthew Stafford, he threw an interception on a play where he ended up getting injured. After that, the Ravens were able to take it down. They scored. The backup quarterback there came in and immediately threw. It was Jake Rudock, who I don't know anything about, but
Jake Rudock, he went to Michigan. He went to Michigan.
There you go. You got a Michigan boy out there, but he threw a pick six there from that point, and the Ravens were able to really pull away after that. One thing that stood out to me in this game, just somewhat off topic, but Justin Tucker kicked a 51-yard field goal, and I have never in my entire life heard the announcers talk about a kicker for so long after that. They just went on and on about he is like the god of kickers, and if you could have anyone to kick a field goal late in the game, it would be him. And even one time he threw a pass. I have never in my life heard talk so much about a kicker, but they had a whole lot of love for Justin Tucker this week.
And hey, rightfully so. I mean, he's definitely the best kicker in the NFL, and I don't know if you knew this, Zach. He's actually an opera singer as well, which is a little interesting.
Did not know that.
For the listeners. Yeah, he's an opera singer, which is interesting. I always found opera to be kind of interesting. It's not something I listen to, but it's definitely interesting for sure. I mean, you got like fat women and dressed up as like Vikings singing, Italian songs. Opera's odd. I always found opera to be odd. I'm a big music guy. I like all genres for the most part. That's something I never understood. But I digress.
Odd is definitely more how I describe it, rather than interesting, where you went first.
It is odd
for me.
It is odd for sure. It's very odd. But yeah, this game, man. Look, the Lions, boy, they are acting like the Lions. Their old stadium, the Pontiac Silverdome, was just imploded this week, and is that not symbolic for their season after this game? They have just fallen apart, and their season is just crumbling down. They clearly aren't going to make the playoffs. After high hopes this year, they got off to a nice 3-1 start. Could have been 4-0. And then they lost 3 in a row. Then they won 3 in a row. Now they've lost 2 in a row. So they just can't get anything going, any sort of stability here for the Lions. And look, that's what you come to expect from the Lions. I mean, they are what they are. I mean, this is a team that year in, year out just says, okay, we're going to rely on Matthew Stafford to try and win us games. We're going to make him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Reality check here. Detroit, that program or that formula doesn't seem to be working. You might want to figure something else out. Maybe try to beef up that defense a little bit more, or maybe try to get a running back here, because you haven't had a running back to get 100 yards rushing in about 5 years. Maybe work on that. I mean, if I'm a Lions fan, I have to be disgusted by what this organization is doing. I mean, they're waste. And look, I like Stafford. I've always been a big Stafford guy. I don't think he is the highest paid player in the NFL, but he's good enough for you to win if you put the right pieces around him and play complimentary football and not have him throw the ball 50 times a week. I like Matthew Stafford. I think he's good enough that you could win with. But they're not doing that here. And they just continue to do the same thing week in and week out, year in and year out. And as far as the Ravens go, man, they keep just wanting – they must listen to our show. They must get around on Monday or Tuesdays when they're in the they're in the jacuzzi, the rehab room, and they probably got us hooked up to their speakers, pumping out there, and they just say, Zack and Ryan, man, they just keep saying we suck and we're not going to make the playoffs, and they don't believe in us. And look, week in and week out, look, they've won 3 in a row. I believe, if I remember correctly, they're holding on to one of them wild card spots. So, look, until they lose, I guess from here on out, I have to start saying maybe Baltimore's a team that's going to get into the playoffs.
Yeah. I know I said it last week that I think they are, as much as I have not liked watching them, I have not thought the team's very good, but I do think they're going to end up in that number 6 seed, which is where they're sitting right now, and make the playoffs as that final wild card team there. And one guy that's really helped them out has been Alex Collins, who was an undrafted free agent there with Seattle. They cut him, and he's filled in very impressively this year, where they've had all kinds of issues at the running back position. They've tried various different players, but especially the last 3-4 weeks, he's very much reliable for him. He had 75 yards, scored 2 touchdowns on the ground in this game. And on the Lions side of the ball, like you said, that running back position continues to kill them. They did have Tion Green have 51 yards and a touchdown. Maybe they have something there with him. He's a guy that hasn't played before for them. I know I don't know anything about him coming into this game, but hopefully they can find something. If not, they've got to draft a running back. It's been too long. I know they drafted Amir Abdullah a couple years ago. He has not been the answer. And they keep going for players like that. They just haven't worked out.
Like scat backs. Like they have this infatuation with these scat backs that can catch the ball out of the backfield, but don't give you much in the way of running the ball in between the tackles. I don't much get it. Getting back real quickly, last thing I want to say, Zach, Baltimore. If the season ends today, they would be the 6th seed, and they would play the 3 seed, who is Tennessee, who I think that's a very favorable matchup for Baltimore in an upset spot there against the Titans, a team that I'm not overly impressed with, a team that they only lost by 3 a handful of weeks ago during the regular season. So I think if that holds serve, obviously things can change from here to the end of the season, which they probably will. But if that holds serve, I think it's a favorable matchup for the Ravens.
I think so too. We've talked about how that Tennessee team, it's still young. They haven't been in the playoffs recently, and that could be a winnable game there, as much as we've been down on the Ravens. So from there, we're going to move to some of these AFC West teams. That this division is just crazy right now, with 3 teams tied for first place with a 6-6 record. The Chiefs were looking so good at one point, and they've just had a monster drop-off as they are on a huge downslide right now to reach that 6-6 record. They lost again this past week to the New York Jets, who are sitting at 5-7. They're not going to make the playoffs, even though mathematically they still have their shot. But the Chiefs have just – their defense has dropped off. I know they lost Eric Berry early in the season, which really hurts. He was that leader on the defense. He was an incredible player. The Chiefs' offense definitely looked solid throughout this game, except for Kareem Hunt. He was great earlier in the season. He did average over 4 yards per carry in this game. He only got 9 carries, but he had a bad drop towards the end of the game. I forget if it was on 3rd down. I'm pretty sure it was on 3rd and short. That he was already looking to go out of bounds and drop that, which really, really hurt the team there. Tyreek Hill is a monster for them. He had 185 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. Travis Kelce, same thing, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns. But they need more from their running game to be able to be the top team that they were early in the season. And they've got to get something out of that defense. They're just getting destroyed on defense, even by a Jets team that this is not a strong offense, but they had multiple players go over 100 yards, Jermaine Kearse and Robbie Anderson. The Jets just they ran this game how they wanted to and were able to – it's weird to say, but they were able to carry themselves on that through their offense. 2 rushing touchdowns by Josh McCown, who also had a good day passing the ball over 300 yards and a touchdown. Just a weird game. I watched a lot of this game, and just weird to me there with the Chiefs being so much worse than they were earlier in the season. They were a team I watched earlier in the season, and they looked great. Now they look great on offense, but defense is just miserable.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how things work, Zach, when you're in a funk, which the Chiefs are. I mean, they score 31 points this week. Their defense doesn't show up. They only their defense shows up a handful of weeks ago in a row. Their offense doesn't show up, and people are telling Patrick Mahomes to come in and play. So it's like they can't get on the same page, offense and defense right now. And look, that's kind of their downfall. And look, you're really kind of starting to see tempers flare with this team. And Travis Kelce in the post-game press conference was, picking on the media, saying, "Oh, you want to talk shit about Alex Smith now after he just had a monster game?" Travis, guess what? Your team still lost. Okay. Why don't you keep your mouth shut and figure out how to win football games, okay? And then you said you watched a good amount of this game. I didn't, but the one part I did watch, because they were in the red zone and they were down, was the play when the Jets were trying to go for 2, and they got called. The Chiefs got called for holding. And Marcus Peters proceeds to pick up the flag and throw it into the stands, which was awesome and hilarious at the same time. I've never seen that. And, I mean, that's just clearly a player that – couldn't take it anymore. Like, his frustration just got the best of him. He's pissed off because they've lost 6 of 7. Defense couldn't get any stops against a Jets team that just isn't very good. And things are kind of unraveling in Kansas City. But the good part, Zach, that you mentioned a couple minutes ago, they're still in first place. They still control their destiny and have everything in front of them.
And they play each of those teams that they're currently tied record-wise with coming up. They've got the Raiders next, and then the Chargers immediately after that. And they actually finished the season against the other divisional team who's been a lot rougher, but that's a game against the Denver Broncos, and it's at Denver there at the end of the season. So they really, truly do control their destiny from here out.
Who do you like? Who do you like to come out on top of this division? If you had to pick right now, which team would you pick? Raiders, Chiefs, or Chargers?
I'm leaning towards.
Come on over to my side.
Are right there. I don't have any belief in the Raiders at all. I am torn because the Chiefs have looked good at times and have impressed me.
Come on,
you
want to pick them. Come on,
have looked good as well.
Come on, pick them.
I know you want me to pick the Chargers because
pick them. Come on
from the start. Just because of that, I'm going Chiefs. Chiefs are winning the division. You heard it here from me, Zach Kaufman.
Yeah, I do. I like the Chargers. I like the kind of confidence that they're playing with right now. I like kind of what they're doing offensively and defensively. And look, they're rolling. And while they're rolling, teams in front of them are losing. So yeah, I like the Chargers to win. Is that who we're going to talk about next, or?
That's where we're heading next. They moved to 6-6. They beat the 0-win Browns here, and great game by Phillip Rivers, great game by Keenan Allen, great game by Hunter Henry. This continues to be consistent there. The Browns return to Josh Gordon. If you're a Browns fan, I guess you can be excited about that. He had 85 yards, but that also meant former first-round pick Corey Coleman had 0 catches for 0 yards. So I don't know. Those are some of the few pieces they have, and Corey Coleman's not doing anything. Josh Gordon is doing something. Maybe they have something from one of those guys, but this is a terrible Browns team.
No, they are. The thing with and it's funny because the thing with the Browns is, and I actually watched a decent amount of this game because it was the 4:00 game that I had the most interest in because I have Rivers and Gordon on 2 of my fantasy teams that are vying for playoff spots right now. So I was watching a good bit of this game. The one thing about the Browns that I've noticed, their defense has some bright spots. I do think that. I do think that the Browns defense is better and has played better than kind of some people maybe would have thought this year, and they're starting to kind of they showed that on Sunday, only giving up 19 points to hot LA team in LA. So, but the offense is just an absolute mess. I mean, yeah, they got Josh Gordon back, but I mean, it's pretty clear that they still don't have a quarterback on the roster. The running game, I mean, sorry, trotting out Isaiah Crowell and Duke Johnson every week, that's just not going to win you football games. Clearly, it hasn't won in any football games, and they got to get that offense figured out. It's a joke. It's a train wreck. As far as the Chargers go, obviously a team I was high on the offseason made me look stupid to start. They're coming back around, and like I said, I think they're going to win the division. I really do. I like the way they're playing, offense, defense, special teams. And the rest of the way isn't anything crazy. I mean, you play Washington this weekend at home. That's a game they probably should win. Then you got to go to Kansas City. They're obviously going to be pumped for that game. That's huge. At the Jets, all right, the Jets are what they are. And then you finish at home against Oakland. So it's right there and very doable for the Chargers to win out and get to the playoffs.
I agree. It's both of these teams are so tight for me because I'm looking at the Chiefs. They've got the Raiders, Chargers, and Broncos, like I mentioned, and then the other teams, the Dolphins, who are way down. So they have a favorable schedule as well. And either way, it could be a scenario that one of these teams makes it as a divisional winner and the other bumps out a team like the Ravens from the playoffs, depending how their season finishes up. And
I'll tell you. Go ahead.
Well, one name I just want to bring up real quickly for the Browns that does give a little hope. David Njoku had a good game here, 74 yards and a touchdown. And as he continues to improve and look like he's going to be a solid player for them, but they've got to do something at quarterback, running back. Probably that line, which looked good at one point. I believe that was last year that their line was looking solid, but it just hasn't been the same here.
Yeah, and what I was going to say lastly was I'm sure that the upper echelon teams here in the AFC, the division winners, the top 4 seeds, I don't think they want to see the Chargers sneak into the playoffs. I mean, they're a team – you see it every year. There's a team that sneaks in and gets in that teams don't want to play, and I believe that the Chargers are that team right now, clicking on all cylinders. And I'm sure a team like the Titans or the Patriots or the Steelers, they don't want to see the Chargers in the playoffs.
I'd fully agree with that. We've seen their offense. We saw it over Thanksgiving. A lot of people watched that game as they dominated the Dallas Cowboys there. Their offense has some stud players on it. And I fully agree with you that they're a teams aren't going to want to see. We talked about some of those weaker end playoff teams. That's not the Chargers if they make it there. They can definitely beat some good teams. They have that ability, even though their record's sitting there at 500. From there, we'll go to the last team in that division that's tied for that top spot. Even though I'm not a believer in them, but we'll still talk about them. The Raiders sitting at 6-6. They pulled out a win against the Giants, 24-17, as the Giants continue to be a 2-win team there. Marshawn Lynch led the Raiders. He had 101 yards and a touchdown. And the Raiders were able to win even without their top 2 receivers, Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper, playing. They had Cordero Patterson lead them in receiving with 97 yards there. I am not a believer in this team at all, especially, like we said, they're playing both the Chiefs and the Chargers coming up here. They don't stand out enough at any position. They've also got the Cowboys and Eagles, which makes that a really tough schedule there. If they had a little bit better of a schedule like the Chiefs and Chargers do, I might have some hope for them. But I don't see this team having a chance, even though they're sitting in the same position as those other 2 teams.
Yeah, I mean, come on, dude. This team won by a touchdown at home against the Geno Smith-led Giants. Like, that tells you all you need to know. And look, don't give me all this shit, people, with any given Sunday, anything, bullshit. At home, with everything to play for, against Geno Smith and the Giants, you need to whitewash this team. Look, I know Crabtree's out. I know Cooper's out. Oh, boo-hoo. A lot of teams are going through injuries right now. The Giants stink and are very bad on both sides of the ball. Okay? The fact that the Raiders couldn't win this game 34-7 or something like that, That tells me all I need to know, that this isn't a team that's gonna be the team that rises and takes this division. So I really don't have much to say about the Raiders, because they've just been very disappointing all year.
I fully agree. And on the other side, Evan Ingram, he had 99 yards and a touchdown. That's all I need to mention about the Giants. This is a bad team. They're in a weird situation here where they benched Eli Manning. They started Geno Smith. They clearly – it's just a terrible PR position for them there as a team, because they're about to start Eli Manning again after firing both their GM and Bob McAdoo today, I believe it was. So do you have any thoughts on this? Do you think this turns this team around? Does anything for them moving forward?
Well, I don't know, because I
clearly don't think it'll do anything this year.
Here's the thing. When I look at teams in the NFL, okay, you could pick any team, okay? I pick any good team, okay, because bad teams clearly don't have an identity. But if you pick any good team in the NFL right now, they have an identity. You can pretty much tell, and we can tell you what their identity is. Okay, you have the Patriots. Their identity is Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. That's all you need to know. The Steelers, their identity is we're going to win with hard physical defense and our talented trio of playmakers on offense. You look at the Eagles. We're very balanced. We're going to run the ball, throw the ball with Wentz, and we play good defense. Any number of good teams in the NFL, they have an identity. The Giants don't have an identity. I mean, what is Eli going to be back next year? They don't have a head coach. They don't have a general manager. What direction do they go as a head coach? The head coach, and I saw a tweet today that kind of made me stop and think and say, yeah, you're kind of right, this is going to be a very bad offseason to hire head coaches. There's not a lot of great candidates. There's not going to be a whole lot of openings. People aren't going to be losing their jobs left and right like most years. This is going to be a tough spot for them. And look, for me, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. And I'm probably in the minority here. I know I am. But did this team not make the playoffs last year? Like, am I missing something here? I mean, this team made the playoffs last year. And pretty much their entire team and anyone that's respectable on it right now is hurt. I mean, what did you expect Ben McAdoo to do? I mean, do I think Ben McAdoo is a good coach? Not really. I think he was kind of a dipshit anyway. I mean, just the way he looked on the sidelines, and just kind of the stuff he did, and then with the Manning situation, it was such just a catastrophe. But at the end of the day, I don't think anyone could have been productive with what was going on with the injuries and players getting into trouble. And I mean. McAdoo can only go do so much. I mean, McAdoo's not a babysitter. I mean, these are grown men. These are professionals. You're going to get in trouble. Sorry, you're suspended. I mean, he can't control these players. He can't control people getting hurt. I am probably in the minority in saying that I think Ben McAdoo kind of got a bad job. If I was the GM, okay, look, he made the playoffs for us last year. Bad year this year. A lot of weird things happen. Let's give him one more year, see what happens next year when we get Beckham back. We have Manning again. We're going to have a high draft pick. Let's get an impact player in here to help us out. Let's give him one more year. You have a down year next year. All right, maybe you need to think about going in a different direction. But I think this is a perfect example, and I've said this on many different platforms to friends, on podcasts. I have an issue with general managers and owners firing coaches too soon. In the NFL nowadays, it's expected for these coaches to come in and within 2 years have their team in the playoffs. With a lot of these teams, that's unfair. With the roster that these coaches have and just all the stuff they have to deal with, that's just unfair. You need to give these coaches 3, 4, 5 years to try to get things to where they need to be. And owners and general managers nowadays just don't want to do that. So I think McAdoo, if it was me, I'd have brought him back for another year and give him that kind of make or break year. You had a good year, you had a bad year. Now let's see what you do in the third year. How do you feel there? Do you think you called a bad rap, or were you okay with them firing?
I understand the firing. It's just I feel like a lot of times teams need a scapegoat there, and it's unfortunate. It's
of course.
it's not necessarily deserved, but after such a drop-off from being a playoff team to being a 2-win team, I think that is one impressive thing with the Cowboys when they went through that period. They had that Tony Romo injury that led them to have a terrible season. They had that high draft pick. They took Ezekiel Elliott. And that's one thing that it was very uncertain if they'd keep Jason Garrett or not. And they did. And I do appreciate that patience to give him a chance to have him come back. And then they were able to have that 13-3 season last year. They're not giving McAdoo a chance. I doubt he would have brought him back to where they were before. Eli Manning's just not the answer for them moving forward in the future. I think this team needs a rebuild. Their core players are still very young. Evan Ingram, Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard. They have those in place on offense. I think they need to draft a quarterback and build up from that point. And this can be a prolific passing offense with some of the weapons they have. They also need a running back. They have plenty of positions to fill that I don't think McAdoo was making that turnaround. And I think that's what they'll be looking for, to find someone that can kind of rebuild them over the next couple years. And it's not, I don't think they need to make the playoffs this next year. And I think they understood that. And they're moving in that direction away from Eli Manning, who I'd expect him to be cut or traded in the offseason and go to a team maybe like the Cardinals, depending what happens with Carson Palmer. Go to a team that could use a quarterback for a year, for 2 years, something like that, to see if he could to get them in the playoffs or keep them around that playoff hunt. And that's what I see from this organization. And I like it. I support this firing. I don't think he was bad for the position, but I think they're moving in an entirely different direction.
Yeah, I think so too. And look, the GM and the owner, I think, were more to blame than McAdoo, because it came out and said that this wasn't McAdoo's doing, the whole Eli situation. It was the ownership and the general manager, and which was one of the more idiotic things I've ever seen happen. I was coming home from work, right, and I'm sitting at a red light, not 5 minutes from my house, and I hop on Twitter quick at the red light, and the first thing I see is the Giants are benching Eli Manning and Geno Smith will start. And I'm not even kidding. I laughed out loud. Like, I laughed because I'm like, this has got to be a joke. Like, I mean, you can't be serious. You're going to bench Eli, who, look, I'm not the biggest Eli fan in the world, but I mean, anybody that watches professional football knows that Eli Manning is a better quarterback than Geno Smith and gives you a better chance to win. If they would have said, we're going to start Davis Webb, the rookie, over Eli, okay, I get that. You want to see what the rookie has? Okay, you have 2 wins. You're not going anywhere. Sure, fine. But you bench him to start Geno Smith? I mean, you know what you have in Geno Smith. Everyone knows what you have in Geno Smith. We've seen it. So this is just, the organization is run so poorly. They need to hire a general manager they need to hit a home run with the general manager hire, because by hitting a home run with the general manager hire, in turn, you get a good head coach in here and you can turn things around. So it all starts with hiring a good general manager, and we'll see if they do that.
Right, especially leading into a draft where they're going to have high picks every single round here coming up. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach that. So the last game we'll get to before we get to 3 of the bigger games is the Titans beating the Texans. It was 24-13. Wasn't that close. The Titans moved to 8-4. They're sitting in a nice position there for the playoffs. Texans dropped to 4-8. Derrick Henry, he had a 75-yard touchdown run there with 46 seconds left. Until that point, it was a little bit closer, 17-13. He put up some good stats there, and he's been taking over that starting running back role, or that number 1 running back role, from DeMarco Murray. Even though they both had big games here, Henry had 109 yards. Most of it contributed with that 75-yard run. And then DeMarco Murray had 66 yards. DeAndre Hopkins continues to be very, very high quality for Houston, even though he didn't have a touchdown. He's just getting absurd targets. He's got 14 in this game, and it's been like that throughout the season. It's the reason I traded for him early in the season in one of my fantasy leagues, that just no matter what happens, they're feeding him the ball this year. And that's something that didn't happen last year. And it's something I've loved to see throughout this entire year here. But the Titans, they should be a playoff team here. Do you have any other thoughts on this game?
Honestly, man, no, not really. The Titans just continue to show me that they're nothing special, and I don't think we'll amount to much in the playoffs. They got outgained in this game by the Texans. If it wasn't for a costly Texans turnover and 11 penalties by the Texans, who knows? Maybe the Texans win this game. So not overly impressed with the Titans. I mean, for the love of God, you let Tom Savage chuck 365 yards on your ass. That's not going to impress anyone. So, yeah, I'm good with this game the rest of the way here.
All right, we'll move on from that. We'll get to the Saints and Panthers game, which I watched a lot of this past week. Saints moved to 9-3 with a 31-21 victory over the Panthers, who are now 8-4. This was a fun game to watch. Alvin Kamara is amazing. That is what I came away from this game thinking. His one touchdown when he took a huge hit from
at the goal line.
I believe it was Shaq Thompson.
Yeah, at the goal line, right?
Yeah, at the goal line, and he bounced off it, kept his balance, and got right in there for the touchdown. He was incredible there throughout the game. Both him and Ingram continue to be what this Saints team rely on, even though they have Drew Brees there. And I was very impressed with this Saints team here, pulling out a win against another quality team, even though the Panthers have their issues. They continue to not get much from the running game, but a fun game to watch. Alvin Kamara, incredible. Those were my biggest thoughts on that game there.
Yeah, absolutely. Kamara, I mean, he's just taking over the NFL right now. Definitely going to be the offensive rookie of the year, you would think. Just makes highlight reel plays and big plays in key times, week in and week out. And in a game that was probably going to go a long way in deciding the NFC South champion, the Saints relied on him, and he stepped up to the plate big. And look, the Panthers kind of are what they are, and kind of what I thought that they would be the rest of the way, and that's just okay. Like they don't do anything. Like when I watch the Panthers play, I don't look at them and say, this is a team I can see winning the Super Bowl. I just don't see it. I don't think they're in the same category as the Eagles, Saints, Rams, and Vikings. I think they're in a notch below them. If they would have went in and won this game, I mean, maybe a different story. But they kind of the second quarter is kind of where things got a little separated, or the third quarter, when Kamara goes 20 yards on a nice touchdown run and puts New Orleans up by 2 touchdowns, and they don't look back after that. So, credit to the Saints. Look, they always are tough to beat in the Superdome there down in New Orleans. And, that's a big win for them, not only because it's a divisional game, but because of what happened last week. They went to L.A., laid an egg against the Rams, people thinking, well, are the Saints for real? They lost a tough road game. Come back home, shut some people up for a little while. The Saints obviously are a team that, has potential to win the NFC this year for sure, just with the balance that they have. And to me, it comes down to their defense. We saw them last week, the defense not be as sharp as, we had been accustomed to against the Rams. And then 2 weeks ago against the Redskins, they got lit up. So let's see how they finish the year with 2 tilts against the Falcons. Let's see how the defense holds up. But, I do. I like the Saints.
I definitely do too. And this is a game that wasn't even that close, even though it ended up with a 10-point game. It was 31-14 before a late Panthers touchdown there. The Saints, their defense is definitely a lot better.
Sure.
And that's something that's huge for them. Their running game's been great. Their passing game continues to be great. even though Breeze isn't even putting up the stats that he's put up in other years, but he still has that ability. They've just been able to rely on the running game so much more than in other years. We'll move from that game into two other teams that are right there around the top of the NFC. The Seahawks beating the Eagles 24-10. Seahawks now move to 8-4. The Eagles, they dropped down to 10-2. They're still sitting at the top of the NFC there. Russell Wilson, incredible player throughout this game. I was still impressed with Carson Wentz, even though he made some mistakes. He did throw for 348 yards. He had a couple incredible throws. One as he was being tackled, a long throw to Nelson Aguilar, and another on a touchdown to Nelson Aguilar, rolling out to the right, throwing back across the entire field and just dropping it in perfectly for the touchdown. I was very impressed by that. Aguilar had a huge game, 141 yards and a touchdown. But the Seahawks, number one, I mentioned Russell Wilson, big game, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. And they finally had a running game. Mike Davis showed up for them, which was big. They've gone through so many running backs this year that haven't been productive. He had 16 carries, 64 yards, including a great 22-yard run, shaking multiple defenders. I want to say it was 5 or 6 different defenders with some impressive quick cutbacks there. That could be big for them if he can continue to be relied on. I have my doubts because that just seems like what it is for the Seahawks, that they have a running back that has a good game and then he drops off like a Thomas Rawls that we just don't hear about much from that point. But that would be big for them if he can be a reliable offensive threat for that team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if they can get any sort of running game going to help Russell Wilson out, that's just another feather in their cap. But watching that entire game, obviously, what Russell Wilson does is it's unbelievable. I mean, he's just back there playing backyard football, and on about 3/4 of their dropbacks, the Eagles were getting pressure, consistent pressure. But they just couldn't get to him because he would, run around, make plays, do that, patent it, turn his back and spin out the backside that he does so much, and just keep plays alive and find guys downfield. And it's tough as defensive back, Zach. You coach the position, that anytime a quarterback extends the play, you're asking these defensive backs and linebackers to cover for 6-7 seconds. That's unfair. That's almost impossible. So just a whirlwind of the season for Russell Wilson, and just a microcosm this game was of the season that he's putting together. He's accounted for all but one of their touchdowns this year. That's, I've never heard of that. I mean, not in the years I've been watching football, but also not in history. I don't remember ever hearing that. That's crazy. All but one of their touchdowns, and he's accounting for 87% of their offense. That's nuts. He's a leading rusher. If this team was 10-2 or 9-3 right now, he's MVP worthy right now. I think he should be MVP even with their record. Who gives a shit about their record? They're going to get to the playoffs probably. That's good enough. This guy should be the MVP. I said it last week or 2 weeks ago on our show. If they don't have Russell Wilson, this team is under 500. And if you don't think that, you're delusional. If they don't have Russell Wilson, they're I'm not going to say they're a top 10 draft pick, but they're middle of the pack, just an average team, probably below average record-wise. So credit to him. Flip the script real quick on the Eagles. I've seen a lot of people kind of badmouth the Eagles. I'm not really sure why. This is a Sunday night game on the road in Seattle. Again, Seattle had to have if they wanted to make the playoffs. That's tough to ask the Eagles. They've just won 9 in a row. I mean, they're still 10-2. And to me, this game was about more of what the Eagles didn't do versus the Seahawks just kind of lining up, smacking them in the mouth, and just, outplaying the Eagles. I mean, you look, first drive for the Eagles. Wentz misses a wide open Nelson Aguilar at about the 25, 30-yard line with nobody around him. He catches that with Aguilar's speed. He's into the end zone. Boom, it's 7-3 Eagles. Who knows how the game goes? And then first drive after halftime, Nice drive right down the field. The Eagles made some nice adjustments. Wentz pulls the ball from LeGarrette Blount on a read option, shoots up the middle, and gets hit at about the half-yard line and fumbles the football. They score there. It's a tie game. Who knows how the game goes from there? And he also missed Aguilar later in the third quarter on a similar play on the other side of the field where he's wide open. If he leads them instead of underthrowing him like he does, that's a touchdown. So they left a lot of plays out there to where if those plays are made, the Eagles possibly win this game by 7 to 10 points. They didn't. I get it. They had a bad game, but this doesn't take away from what I think my opinion on the Eagles are. I think they're a very good team. And I actually came out and said yesterday, and I'll put it on tape right now, I think the Eagles are going to go into L.A. on Sunday, and I think the Eagles are going to beat the Rams by double digits. That's just the feeling I have. I think they win by double digits. That's my prediction for Sunday. I think they're going to win by double digits and bounce back and have a really good game. I think you can run on the Rams. I think they're going to have success. This is the first game since week 1, Zach, that the Eagles didn't rush for 100 yards. And I think they get the running game going again, and they'll be fine. And like you said, even with him leaving some plays out there and making some mistakes, Carson Wentz still played pretty well. So they'll be fine. I'm not worried about it. Tip your hat to Seattle and to Russell Wilson, and I just hope we don't see him in the playoffs.
Yeah, the Eagles are still a high-quality team there. That's not something I think you should be worried about at all. I love that prediction there, them winning by double digits against the Rams. I don't know if I see it quite that way, but I definitely see them beating the Rams. I think they'll bounce back well. And that makes sense that they could beat them by double digits there. It'll be interesting to see. So we'll move from there to our final game that we'll get into here today, which was the Steelers bringing quite the comeback against the Bengals. They got down 17-0 early in that game on 2 A.J. Green touchdowns. A.J. Green also had another touchdown that was called back because of a holding call. Could have had a 3-touchdown game there. Monster performance for him, especially in fantasy football. Antonio Brown had an incredible catch there at the end of the game to tie it with under 4 minutes left, and they were able to win it on a Chris Boswell field goal with no time left on the clock at the end of the game. Le'Veon Bell had a monster game. He had 106 yards and a touchdown through the air on a weird touchdown where William Jackson there on the Bengals came up, had a chance to push him out of bounds, and just stopped like he thought he had already run out of bounds. And Le'Veon Bell just kept on going the rest of the way for a touchdown. And he also had 76 yards on the ground. So big games all around there for those Steelers star players. And then from A.J. Green on the other side. As the Steelers pull out, it is good to see for them because they've had their struggles in away games. And this was one playing in Cincinnati. Even though it was ugly, it's good to see them, if you're a Steelers fan, pull out a win in an away game like this against a division rival. Although not what you'd like to see when it comes to it being an ugly game where they had to come back from a 17-0 deficit.
Yeah, this game last night had a lot going on. This game epitomized Marvin Lewis's career with the Bengals. If they don't fire this guy after this year, I'm not sure what the brass up there in Cincinnati is thinking. This guy has 2 home wins against the Steelers in his career. Only 2. And he's been there for over a decade, I believe, if not a decade. I mean, that's a problem. Okay, the Steelers just constantly beat Cincinnati, and look, if I'm a Pittsburgh fan, a Baltimore fan, obviously not a Cleveland fan, they don't matter in that division, but if I'm a Baltimore and a Pittsburgh fan, every year he comes back, I smile ear to ear, and say, okay, Cincinnati, that's one team we don't have to worry about. Because Marvin Lewis is a joke. Nice guy, great guy. Everyone says how good of a guy he is. Gruden, all these media guys say how good of a guy he is. He's a nice coach. Okay, but he doesn't win. He doesn't win, and that's what you pay these guys to do, and he doesn't win. Getting back to Pittsburgh, look, you credit them for getting the win, but we've seen this from Pittsburgh all year. Pittsburgh is the epitome of playing down and playing up to your competition. They did it last week against Green Bay at home and sneaked out a win. They did it this week against Cincinnati and sneaked out a win. They did it early in the year. They lost to the Bears. They lost to the Jaguars. But then the big games against the marquee teams, they rise up and they play well against. And I fully, expect them to play well in 2 weeks at home against the Patriots. So they're a weird team. I think they just kind of go through the motions against these inferior teams and just know that they can find a way to win late. And then there are obviously some scary moments in this game, Zach, is linebacker Ryan Shazier in the first quarter on what looked to be just a routine play on a routine tackle, gets hit and goes down. He goes to make a tackle, and as you're taught not to do, he drops his head and the crown of his helmet goes into the Cincinnati player, and he goes to the ground. And as soon as he goes to the ground, he lands on his stomach. And then he rolls over to his back and kind of reaches for his back. And then you can see him kind of flexing his hands, like trying to see if he has feeling in his hands. And I was watching it as it happened, and it was really scary. I mean, it was really scary. You weren't sure. He wasn't moving his legs. Like, you weren't sure if he was paralyzed right then and there on the field. And, you're not sure what was going on. So obviously, thoughts and prayers with him and his whole family. And really classy move by the Steelers today too. They sent a private plane down to where his family lives and flew him to Cincinnati so that they could be with him and be with him all day today. He's still in the hospital there in Cincinnati. Haven't really got an update on his condition yet. So we'll wait and see what happens there. And then obviously the two hits, Zach, that were today suspension worthy, the NFL thought. Juju Smith-Schuster on a crackback block on Vontaze Burfict. Leads with the shoulder, kind of got him in the head a little bit. Was flagged for it, 15 yards, got 15 yards then for standing over top of him, unsportsmanlike conduct. And then the safety for Cincinnati on the Antonio Brown touchdown catch you mentioned a minute ago at the end of the game that tied the game. Kind of launched himself and hit Antonio Brown in the head, got a penalty, 15 yards. And he's suspended as well. So I'm interested to see your whole opinion on all of this, because I said to you before the show, I said that I thought the NFL has gone soft with all of this. If we were watching this game in 6th or 7th grade, we would have jumped up with those hits and be like, oh, damn, like, hell yeah. And there would have been no flags. There would have been nothing. They would have picked the players up off the field, took them to the sideline, checked them out there, and the game would have kept going on. Nowadays, any sort of big hit, there's multiple flags get thrown in. And I feel like the league has just gone soft, and, these players know what they're signing up for when they play. It's a violent game. It's a vicious game. What's your opinion on all this?
I agree with you that it is more so a violent game. I like that the NFL is doing better looking out for their players, and it's hard to find a balance between those two things there. I know a lot of these hits, I fully agree with you. When we were younger and the rules weren't as strict, it would have been a celebrated hit. Seeing it happen the first time through with that Juju Smith-Schuster hit, it looked like a great block that he just laid him down. But watching the replay, you see that he did make contact with the head, and I know what they're looking for, and I do appreciate that.
Their big thing is defensive, quote unquote, defenseless players. That's the term you hear a lot. Burfict was a defensive player there. Brown was a defensive player in the end zone after making a catch. That's the term they like to throw around, defenseless player.
Those plays, I can see why it's called. I understand it. There are plenty. I can't stand when someone slaps the quarterback's helmet and that is a penalty. I think that is way too far. But hits like that, I can understand why it's called that, and I appreciate it, even though I don't like it as much. It's still great to see that big hit, but it's still for the player's safety, and I do really appreciate that aspect of it. even though it's more exciting to see those monster hits, those monster tackles, those monster blocks, it's still ultimately about those players' safety because we've had those issues of guys like Junior Seau immediately comes to mind that has had mental issues from all of his concussions throughout his career. There's been plenty of other players. He's just the first one off my mind. And I know the NFL is trying to avoid things like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. They're definitely trying to I don't want to say clean up the game, but just make it more safe and make it more safe for the players, really. And I get that for sure. The big hits I don't have a problem with more so than, like you said, the ticky-tack kind of stuff with the, grazing a quarterback's head, or you graze the face mask and you don't turn the head, but you still call a face mask, or some of these weak pass interference calls. I don't know how you're a defensive back anymore in the NFL. So, no, for sure. And it's definitely something that people will continue to talk about going forward, because it's going to continue to be this way in the years to come. So, it's definitely something that's going to be talked about and be talked about for a while.
Yeah, it definitely always is with those kind of rule changes and as they get adjusted to. So the games we skipped real briefly, the Jaguars beat a terrible Colts team 30-10. We had the terrible Dolphins beat an even more terrible Broncos team by a lot. And then the 49ers in Jimmy Garoppolo's first game were able to barely beat the Bears. Both of those teams not very good this year. Although Tariq Cohen had a crazy punt return touchdown. I don't know if you got to see those highlights where he's running backwards. He cut back across the field, went backwards even farther, and then was able to take it to the house for a touchdown. Impressive play there. Anything to add on either of those three games?
Just one thing on each game. Jacksonville looks like they're going to go to the playoffs. Good for them. Good for that team. Good for that city, for that fan base. Those fans that have been there since the beginning. Good for them. Enjoy it. The Broncos, Christ, are they terrible? I mean, I thought the Dolphins were bad. I thought the Dolphins were just a bad football team. The Broncos are taking it to another level. That offense is dog shit. I mean, I watched 15 minutes of that game, and it was a 15-minute – I wish I could get those 15 minutes back. They are awful. I mean, so bad. It's terrible. So they get a quarterback, maybe an Eli Manning you alluded to earlier, maybe someone like that, because they need one bad. And until they get one, things are going to continue to be bad in Denver. And with San Francisco, how about Robbie Gould? 5 field goals, kicks the game winner against his former team in Chicago on the road. And it's funny, I don't know if you saw it, he kicks the game winner for Chicago. He actually looked over to their sideline, was kind of taunting a little bit, like, yeah, that's what happens. You get rid of me. I come back here to Chicago and beat you guys, and San Francisco gets their second win of the year. So I thought that was kind of cool.
There we go. I like all those points. Exactly correct. And we've got a good slate of games coming up this coming week. The Saints and Falcons start us off on Thursday, which both of those teams, the Falcons are fighting for a playoff spot. The Saints are looking good there towards the top of the NFC. We talked about the Raiders and Chiefs. They're playing each other. They're tied at the top of their division currently, so that's a big game. Both the Vikings and Panthers are looking like playoff teams. Seahawks and Jaguars play each other, Eagles and Rams, and Ravens and Steelers there. All of those huge, great slate of games coming up here for this next week.
That's awesome. I can't wait. I'm going to park my behind on the couch at 1 o'clock and probably not move the majority of the day. I'm looking forward to it for sure. So many fantastic matchups. My remote's going to get a workout for sure. So yeah, probably the best weekend of football so far as competitive games and matchups we're looking forward to goes for sure.
I'd agree with that. So that's our coverage from this past week of the NFL. Thank you so much for listening to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. We really appreciate it. We've changed some things up based on some of the feedback we've received. So we'd love to continue hearing your feedback as we continue to build this platform with our podcast. It's very helpful to us if you can share it with the people you know that you think would be interested. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a great week.